want to especially thank Adiri for putting this together and I do catch up with the group chat, occasionally. And I see the effort that she's putting and everyone is putting to make sure we bring ourselves up to be top players in the industry. Because the truth is, I'm not going to mention any tribe. I know majority of the people here probably we've relocated from a country of origin. I know majority we are from Nigeria, and we're just trying to be successful where we are currently. And I normally make reference to some part of the world, to be specific, the Indians. If you see the way they pull themselves, like I once read something on LinkedIn that in a top school, one of these Ivy League school in the US, there are some Black guys in the school and there are some Asian guys in the school. So after a while, for you to even get admitted into the school, you must be a top performer because it's an Ivy League school. After a while, a professor observed that the Asians, they are doing very well while the Blacks were lagging behind. I don't know if anyone has read the story before. Or, what so people were, it's difficult, it's easy. I don't know if we would have experienced, especially those of us that are not in Nigeria, you would have experienced it before when probably you go into a meeting room and before you even talk, they've kind of labeled you like, oh, what does she even have to offer? What does he have to offer? It's from Africa, by the way. What do they know? That kind of, it usually happens. And, by the time you start talking or maybe you start sharing your knowledge, then people will get, oh, yeah. So, they kind of respect you. So the point I'm trying to make is that bias is always there. It's usually there. I won't say always. So the same thing happened in that school. The students, the other lecturers were already talking behind the back, like, okay, these Black guys, how did they even get in the face? That they are not matching up to the standard of the school. So the professor now said, let me go have a conversation with these guys. And he started observing, and he noticed that the Asians, they work together. They have study groups, they have knowledge sharing session, while the Blacks, they're studying so hard. Most times when you see them, they're in the library, but they're studying, individually in isolation. So the professor now called them together and he said, okay, you guys, from today onwards, I want to see you study together. And that's going to be part of your, like a performance review for you guys. So they started coming together, working together, and it was discovered that before long, they overtook the Asian guys and they became, leaders in the class. What am I trying to say? It is natural. When we get to an environment, I think it's more of a cultural thing for us. We just want to do our thing, shine individually. But Ediri and the people coordinating the PDA, they're doing a good job to make sure that okay, this shouldn't be the case. We need to pull each other up. We need to help each other. Like you that you're strong in one place need to help whoever needs support in any way. So in a nutshell, thank you, Ediri. Thank you everyone that has been contributing to the community. And I'm hoping that, before long, we'll start hearing, good testimonies of people, probably landing their job in their desired area and so on and so forth. Having said that, today is not for story. As you read, I'm Christabel, and currently I'm in North America. I'm working as a data engineer. But how did I start? I actually started as a data analyst some years ago. And, that time was like DB4 and Excel. And, I didn't really think much of it. Well, I've always known that I liked data. I know, even from secondary school, but I didn't really know what to make out of it. So after I worked on that job in a shipping company in Nigeria for a while, and I took a break to study. I went to England to study like to do computer science. I did HND before, so I went to for a second degree in computer science, and it was afterwards. So if you listen, I started as a data analyst, even though that wasn't the road. We call it like data something entry clerk or something like that. That time, but pretty much it's actually like a role of a data analyst that I was playing. After my school, I came back. I started, then I went back to Nigeria. I started as a database administrator. That time too, it's pretty much like on-prem databases. So it was SQL Server. And shortly afterwards, went for business intelligence development. And that was when I met Idiri. And, went into consulting, cool stuff, went into, data science and all those kind of things. And how did I eventually become a data engineer? So when I came to North America, I actually started a bit in Nigeria, like some training, big data training were done, but it was all trainings. So when I got here, we the organization I used to work for, um, I was a business intelligence developer because that is what actually like the data engineering that I would say that is now the sophistication part of a business intelligence developer is what transitioned into a data engineer. So when I joined the organization where, it's a retail company that is working with the largest retail or one of the largest retail in North America. So those are their partners. And, after a while, it was actually started like a joke because I was still a bit business intelligence developer. We're doing the regular thing, building data warehouse and, pushing data out. But we noticed that the data we're processing, we need to step it up a bit. And apart from that, we need to step up our infrastructure, our tech stack. And we got a consultant and it was just taking forever. One day I just, put it on a piece of paper. Okay, these are the things we're supposed to be doing. I presented to the vice president then and she loved it. And so that was how, the whole journey started. We transitioned from, the holding technology into the modern tech stack. We're using PySpark, we're using Airflow and everything. And, once you get into that space, you're no longer doing the regular business intelligence developer. So, which is the things I just want to like set the ground for what we'll be talking about today. Usually you don't just, it's some people, like especially this Gen Z, the people that are just graduating now, might be easier for them to just get into the role of the data engineer. But for some of us that probably we've started our career, we spent 15 years in banking, we spent, 10 years doing other things. It might we might need to be tactical in the way we transition into data engineering. And those are the things we want to talk about today. So without saying more story, let's dive into it. And a lot of all the experiences that I get on the way that, the things that happen, if it's relevant, we're going to be talking about it as we progress. But for now, I just want to introduce you to how we want to structure things today. So this will be what we will touch on briefly. I don't want it to be too theoretical. So it's going to be more of a chat. And I want us to be able to benefit from this session as much as possible. I don't know everything, but to the best of my knowledge, I will try to answer every question. And if we need to get back to it, if I need to ask people and get back to you, I'll let you know. I'll be sharing my experience on the job. I'll be sharing my experience, having led a data engineering team before, what you need to be on the lookout for. I'll be sharing as we go. But at a glance, these are the high level, these are the things I want us to talk about today. So let's get into it. Who is a data engineer? I don't, in as much as I would have loved to get to know about the background of everybody here, I know the time will not permit us to do that. But I know at some point or the other, we've all worked with data in any form before, even in our day-to-day activity, like you using your phone, you getting recommendation, you opening Google Maps, you want to, go from your house to your office. Google is giving you like shortest route. Those are like application of data. And there are some guys working in the background to make all these things happen. They are the data engineers. And not only the data engineer, but the backbone of most of all the innovation, all the transformation that we're seeing today, the backbone is usually data engineer. And that's why, you've heard it before. That's why nowadays they say data is the new oil. Because there's nothing you want to do today that doesn't entail that. So this makes it a very beautiful career to transition to. However, there are some risks to it, which we'll talk about as we go on, especially with the advent of all this ChatGPT and all the, generative AI. Data engineering as a career is at risk. But you know what? Instead of seeing it like a disadvantage, it's good to use it to your advantage. And we're going to talk about, I believe we should talk about how you can use all these things to your advantage, even as a transition. So theoretically, this is the definition. I don't want to be reading the slides. I believe we can all read, except if we have, people that needs accommodation that I need to read. I don't want it to be like, I'm just reading what you can see. But I want to stress the importance of some of the key terms in this definition. A data engineer designs and you build and you manage infrastructure. So this management of infrastructure is what makes a data engineer to be apart, to be distinct from all the old roles that we used to know before. All the business intelligence developer, ETL developers, those one design, some build, but most don't manage infrastructure. For you to be a very good data engineer, you have to have this attribute: ability to design, ability to build, and that to manage infrastructure. But the thing is, this skill set, to be honest, is not something you can achieve or like gain overnight. It takes time. And that's why we're here talking about the career progression to being a data engineer. So, and when you build all this infrastructure, when you build your pipeline and everything, the primary objective is for data to be accessible in a reliable and efficient manner so that end users are able to use your data to take informed decisions. Let's say, for instance, you want to leave your home, you're going to work, and Google is telling you, take, maybe Third Mainland Bridge or something. Let's assume we're in Nigeria. However, if a data engineer has screwed up, and maybe the data to arrive at this maybe there is a bug somewhere or something. And in reality, maybe Third Mainland Bridge is even the worst to take at that point. It's supposed to actually be Yaba. You can see that because some fundamentals have been screwed up, it's going to, the end game is going to be wrong. So that's why to me, that can happen. I'm just giving that. I'm just trying to give an example of what we can relate to it. Because companies like Google, it's not going to be one person that will sit down and just design it. It goes through a lot of, QA and all those kind of things before they ship anything into production. But I'm just trying to give an example of what we can relate to, of why it's important as a data engineer and as an aspiring data engineer to ensure that whatever we're building is accessible and is reliable. So won't talk much about that. I believe it's self-explanatory. Meanwhile, we might not be able to stop at every point to be asking questions, but I would advise that we please just take note of any question you have, so that there's a Q&A session, as you can see from the overview, at the end of the session. And that's when I believe, just as Eduri said, we are not so much, so we should be able to accommodate every question that we have. But if there's any comments along the line that you think is essential, please, you can probably signify. I may not be able to see everything. Oh yeah, I can see. So you can signify by just, raising your hands or something so that we can accommodate the comments. I want it to be as interactive as possible and as beneficial as possible. So yeah, we've defined, I believe we're all clear. It's mainly someone, a professional, that gets data, usually from a source, the design, how the data should be. They build a pipeline and they manage infrastructure. I don't want to throw some of all these, pipeline ETL at this point. I want us to, get familiar with the concept before using it. But, usually they just, design just like an architect. They design what it should be, they build what it should be, and they maintain all the infrastructure. Because as you know, our computers are everything. They don't just run, they run on memory. So those are the infrastructure. So you still, responsible for managing the infrastructure that your data will run on. This definition will be clearer as we progress, but this is just like theoretically, that is the role of a data engineer. We move on to some terms. Just as I said, I don't want to, start throwing terms without you getting familiar with it. And if there's any term that I think maybe might not be common, because I understand that we're not all from the data background, I will be sure to define them. But if I do not remember, because sometimes when you use something every day, it kind of becomes numb to you. So if there's any term that I use that probably is not clear, please don't hesitate to probably, raise hand or something, just make me pause so that I can define it. So I talked about pipeline. This is the most critical word in the role of a data engineer. Let's look at it as our water, the system that we use at home, the water we use at home. Especially for those of us that live in probably a developed country, and even if in a third world, even if it's from a bowl, except it's from a well, if you go and fetch it. But like ideally, like if you're using a tap water, it's usually from a source. And you use a pipe to take it from the source and to bring it home so that you can use it on a tap. So that explains the role of a data engineer in our everyday world. So a pipeline is like that connector. We have data stored everywhere. Everything, even now, right now, when you're blinking, for some people, you're generating data. because we have tools now, that could look at your gesture and could make suggestions based on that. So even when you're blinking, when you're hitting, you're generating data. So you become a source, or whatever device that is capturing the data becomes a source. And that source, usually, that's not the point of consumption. That data needs to be moved to another point that it will be consumed. So let's say, for instance, blinking or raising hands or doing something or any gesture is a source of data. Data is being captured at that point. And that is our well or our lake that is generating the water. But the water needs to be used at home. We need to connect a pipe to use it at home. But in between the pipe, a lot of things goes on. Like we're gonna have like pressure and everything. So in between that pipeline, that is where most times the work of a data engineer resides. So what is a data pipeline? So that is for our water pipeline. What is a data pipeline? It's a series of steps that move data from one place to another. Typically, from where it is collected, raising hands, gesture, moving traffic, everything, anything that generates data becomes a source of data. It is collected from that point, but usually that is not the point where we want to use it. For instance, if we all, especially if you live in all this part of the world, it's essential that before you go out in the morning, you need to check your weather forecast. Do you know that that is like, the forecast you're checking is as a result of data that have been collected over years. So the fact that it rains today becomes a source of data for tomorrow, for day after tomorrow, for sometimes next year. So the point I'm trying to make is when data is generated, usually that is not the point where it is being used. It needs to be transported, it needs to be transformed to a form that is now going to make sense to the end users. A data engineer is that person that stands in between to make sure that, because like the fact that I raised my hand doesn't mean anything. The fact that I blinked doesn't really mean anything. Although some people that read sign language might say, oh, it means something, it means, but you just speculate. That might not be what I mean. But if that data is collected, matched up with some other indices or some other things, they can now be used to make a decision like, oh yeah, she's blinking because she's reacting to something, or she's blinking, to make an informed decision, to make a good decision, you need to collect the data, transform it, probably match it up to that source of data before you can now, conclude that this is for sure what is happening. So I'll go back to the weather forecast that we're talking about. Data is generated by the fact that maybe it rains today or it suns today or something. Some data engineers will work on it, create a pipeline. And we know that the pipeline I'm talking about is not a physical pipeline. They write codes to ship the data from the point of generation. Okay, someone has recorded it, it rained today, yes. They move that data to a point of storage. And from that point of storage, some other people will now work on it. The data scientists will now work on it and say, oh, it rains this day. We've recorded that it rains today. It rains exactly this time of day, this type of day last year. It did 2 years ago. Correlated with, global warming, other information, they make it together to form an holistic, view of what the weather should be for tomorrow, or what the weather should be for next year. I don't know if that is clear. Like in a layman word, a series of steps that move something from a point to another. Don't let's do so much on that. Just think about your tap water is being moved from your well to your home. The pipeline in between is where the data engineer works in the data world, not in the water world. So ETL means extract, transform, and load. The process that the data engineer carries out within the pipeline, this is one of the processes that the data engineer performs within the pipeline to make sure the data that is being extracted, the water that we're fetching, gets to where it's supposed to be. ETL, that is it in a simple form. It's just an act of, is this acronym just explains it all. You extract data, you transform it by performing some, transformation. Maybe you need to have 2 + 2 to make 4. You do some, transformation on it, and you load it into a place where other systems or other people can use it. Usually, you store it in a data warehouse, but these days they don't even. It's not every time that they store in a data warehouse. Some people use it on the fly, some put it in a data lake, and so on and so forth. Another one that is common in the data world is the API. Without reading through what is written, just see this one as like a waiter in your hotel. Sorry, in your restaurant. I'm very sure you would have gone for fine dining before. When you order food, say I want rice and chicken, for instance, someone takes the order, go to the kitchen, get the food, brings it to your table. So within application, it's the same thing that happens. When you send information that, okay, I want to see flights going from Nigeria to London, something will take it, go to the repository of all the airlines and bring it back to you as a service. So as a response. So this is API. I just don't want you, when you see all these terms, I just want you to be able to relate with them. This is not what we're talking about today. So big data, that's the world we live in. Enormous data, that is big in volume, in velocity, and in variety. This is the food of a typical data engineer, big data. So what are the key responsibilities of a data engineer? Data architecture. You must be able to design a scalable architecture for data. You must be able to model data. You must be able to, understand what is fact, what is dimension, what is bucket, what is partitioning. You must be able to, because let me tell you why this is very, very important these days. Everything we're doing is generating data. And now, and everyone is moving to cloud. And cloud, as we know, is very expensive. So now organizations, even big organizations like Netflix, like Amazon, they are much more concerned now about people that could achieve a good data pipeline. Data pipeline, you remember we talked about it the other time, a means of taking data from one point to the other without breaking the banks. They want someone that could, build a scalable pipeline without using so much resource. So that's why it's good to be able to model, to be able to know, okay, now we want to use this data for so. What are the things I'm going to need? Do I need to bring in every column? Do I need to select some column? Do I need to partition so that when users are querying my tables, they don't just query through everything. It's like partition is just like you keeping things in a room, like in a flat, when you have a 4-bedroom flat and you keep clothing all the flat. If I say go upstairs and probably bring my yellow cloth. If that's all I say, you have to check everywhere in the room. before you're able to, find out where the yellow cloth is. But when I say bring the yellow cloth in so room on top of the bed, it's easier for whoever is going to just go there and pick the cloth. So those are the kind of things in data world that a data architecture design help you to achieve. It helps to compartmentalize your data in such a way that when people are using it, they're able to just go straight to where their data is, and they're not consuming a lot of resource to do that. And that is saving the company a lot of money. So this is a very key attribute of a good data engineer. And to be honest with you, having worked with people, especially people that just jumped into the role of a data engineer, this attribute is lacking in a lot of data engineers because all these people that are probably fresh out of school, they've learned Python, they know how to code in, they know how to do PySpark, they know Hadoop, but they don't really understand maybe database architecture. They haven't gone through maybe being a database, working with the data. You find out that it's Hi, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Just okay, good. Thanks, HP. So even if you're not going to be a data engineer like hand to hand, if this is the only thing, architecture and design, that you want to pick and you focus on, I'm telling you, there is a gap in this space today, even in large organizations. Anything that has to do with system architecture, system design, because now we have a lot of people that can implement, but they don't know how to design. And now organizations are finding out that if you don't design properly, you're going to spend a lot of money maintaining the infrastructure. So this is a space, let's just put it out there. This is a space that you can read about and focus on data architecture, data design. Pipeline development, I've told you, to move data from A to B, you need a pipeline. A typical data engineer spends a ton of their time designing a data pipeline. And how do you design a data pipeline? Definitely know for sure it's not by buying pipes and joining them together. It's by writing codes. It's by writing, good, scalable code. You must be able to, we're going to get to that in this section. You must be able to write, in programming languages that talks to the database, because usually data is stored in a database. I know we all know. We've done our Power BI. We've seen how we move data from Excel into Power BI. Data is stored in a database. So you need a language to be able to talk to the data. Just the same way if I'm here speaking French, I know majority will not understand what I'm saying. So the same way, to talk to a database, to get the data to the data that you need to talk to it in a language that it understands. So that is why you need, the very first thing you need to do is to learn the languages to talk to a database so that you're able to build a data pipeline. Data integration. This is where API comes in. I told you API is just like a waiter that you send on errand to bring you food. So in system to system communication, they too, they send people errand, and the person they send on errand is API. System A communicate with system B with API. Okay, C. It's all about data. That's what we're talking about. That's the role of a data engineer. Data is your food. You need to talk to systems. Hey, um, Google Map database, give me this data for traffic for so date. Google will not just expose their data and put it somewhere for you to just tap so that it doesn't get into the wrong hands. They need to give you a set of API with credentials, and I've defined API for you. It's just like the weather in the data world. It goes between systems. You give it a request, it comes back with a response. So the same way, you need to be able to integrate with systems using API. You need to be able to read documentation for API on how to integrate with an API. I've been in a lot of interviews that when you interview someone that is saying you're applying for a role of engineer, doesn't even know what an API is. It is totally, you can't do much in this world. If in this world of data engineering, if you do not understand the workings of API. So that's another thing, area to not just overly spend time, but you need to know the basics of how to communicate. REST API, SOAP API, how do they communicate? How do you call them? How do you send them on errand? How do you get response from them? How to manipulate JSON to be in a format that you want? Those kind of things. You need to be able to know it. Data warehousing. Usually data is stored in data warehouses. And what is a data warehouse? Just the same way, the way it sounds, that's just what it means. A data warehouse is where, our people from the Eastern Nigeria, they have containers, they have warehouses where they store their goods. The same way in data world. Warehouse, and don't forget, even though I'm trying to use physical, examples, in the data world, we only deal with databases. So when I'm saying storage, I'm referring to a database. And I believe the reason I'm not going through all the nitty-gritty is because I believe, having gone this far in all the things, we're familiar with database, we're familiar with how data is being stored and how to retrieve. So that's why I'm not, even in my definition of terms, I didn't include all those basic things. But if peradventure you're not familiar, please take your time after today to understand databases, how it's being used in data world, how you store data, structured, semi-structured, structured data. Please take your time to this thing, you can just binge on them. You don't have to make it overly serious, like you're going to school for them. Watch a couple of YouTube videos so that at least you're able to speak to them. So data warehouse is where you store data in a way that is accessible for analysis. So you must understand that concept. In short, one of the questions you can't escape, even though the world has gone so, so sophisticated. If I'm employing for my team, one of the questions you can never escape as a data engineer is OLTP, OLAP. You must be able to tell the difference between how data is stored, because that is going to inform the way you design your pipeline, the way you do your architecture. If you don't understand the different techniques that data could be stored, you will not be able to design an optimized pipeline. So data warehousing concept, you need to understand and you need to know what it is, what this speaks to. Big data technologies, this is big. You must, as a data engineer, it is your responsibility to be able to speak to technology like Kafka, to be able to know when these are used. These are just examples. And I don't want to overwhelm you. I'm going to give you a tip for you to be able to catch up gradually with all this, because trust me, Hadoop was a big thing like maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. Now, a lot of organizations are not using Hadoop anymore. Spark is now the big thing. I don't know even if Spark tomorrow, there'll be a more optimized tool. So you shouldn't be overwhelmed by all these big terms. Just, start small and know that the journey to a data engineer, to be a successful data engineer, is a continuous one. You have to keep building on what you've learned, building on it every day. And that doesn't mean, for me, for instance, I wish I could sit down to read, but it's even difficult for me because of all the responsibilities, especially in this world, part of the world, you don't really have help to take care of some things like we used to in Nigeria. So you have to do most things by yourself. So usually, as in at home, in order, apart from your career or your professional world, to support your family, you have to do most things yourself. So you barely have time to say you're sitting down and flipping through for personal development. But even if it's 30 minutes a day, that you have, it is important to be able to maximize it. And that's the only way you can keep on top of your game in the world of data engineering. And we're going to talk about that in a bit. Data governance and quality. I mentioned this about when I talked about Google. Every organization that is mature, it is the responsibility of a data engineer to be able to establish some governance rules against your data to make sure this is big now, especially now with all these Gen AI, to make sure the company, your organization data doesn't get exposed unnecessarily. For instance, I don't know if you typically catch up on maybe happenings in the tech world. I think last year when ChatGPT introduced some APIs, I think a developer in Samsung integrate with that API without reading through the nuances of the terms and conditions. And part of the terms and conditions for that free open edition is that your data will be available in the community. So that's how the developer mistakenly push sensitive information into the open world. So those kind of, a data engineer must not make that kind of mistake. You must be on top of, governance, policies, and all the data quality things you need to do to secure the data of your company. I've mentioned it, and I know you've heard it before. Data is the new oil. It's just like you are now the custodian of a oil well. You must guard it jealously. So that is why governance and quality, when you're pushing out the pipeline, is very important. Quality, you mustn't push out data that is wrong. I've been in meetings when I hear people say, oh, I forgot I put bracket sign in front instead of, simple mistake. I'm not saying mistake don't happen, but like you must make sure you guard against mistakes that could cost a lot in terms of processing resource. Because now it's not, when I'm talking a lot, most times now it's not even money, like someone is saying maybe it cost us, it might not even be quantifiable in terms of money, but like it costs the company's image, or maybe it costs processing time, and that invariably will cost money because especially when you're on the cloud, every second matters. So as a data engineer, you have to be on top of data governance and quality. And this alone is another space. If you don't want to be like overly techy, this is another space you can carve for yourself. There are a lot of governance and quality, standards out there that you can just focus on. ISO, I know in England, UK is big on ISO. You can find ISO. I can't remember it often now. There are some specifically for data governance and data quality. You can make that your own area such that when they're building, you make sure that whatever they are building, large organizations, they'll make sure that whatever you're building in conformity to standard. So this is another space you can make, you can maintain on to make it broader yourself. Collaboration, gone are those days where developers would just sit in one corner and say tech and geeky, they don't talk. The era has passed. As a data engineer, you need to be able to collaborate with stakeholders. You need to be able to hold meeting to gather your requirement to make sure you're building pipeline that will be useful for people upstream. And let me tell you why this is important. For those that are working in developed country, I know in Nigeria we get away with a lot of things because we don't usually want to offend each other. We want to have a bad, so that relationship makes us get away with a lot of things. But here, if you don't build good relationship, especially with as a data engineer with the data custodians, the people that has the well, the source of your water, the source of your data, they are the most important people that you need to build your relationship and collaborate with. And I'll tell you why. Even in big organizations, even in all these Airbnb big organizations that are paying a lot of money to their staff, you find out that after building a very lovely pipeline and it's working, it's been giving water, someone one day will just shut your source and you just come back one day, pipeline that has been working, you've forgotten that you built it. You come back one morning, it's not working. You might spend hours to troubleshoot because before you now discover that someone somewhere changed something in your source. And that was what broke your pipeline. And it happens a lot, especially when you have to rely on APIs, on third-party API. I can't even count the number of times it has happened to me. So that is why it's important to build a good relationship, especially if you're working in the same organization. If you have a good relationship with them, before they change, they will let you know and you will adjust your pipeline accordingly. And that will save you a lot. So collaboration is a key. In short, this is one of the top now responsibilities of a data engineer. Performance optimization. I can't stress this enough. Optimize your data pipeline to make sure it is not consuming a lot of resource. Moving on, this is self-explanatory. It's simple, but it's huge. Performance optimization. I know that a post I read sometime said, companies like Airbnb, like Netflix, they pay data engineers as much as like 500K USD per annum. That's going to be like maybe 250 or thereabout pounds per annum. That's not small money. And what they pay most of all these people, most times, is just to optimize code. That is what differentiates them from the whole ton of people that are, because people are tired of spending a lot on infrastructure to support, and we need data. So they need people that are able to optimize the pipeline. So as you're learning the skills to be a data engineer, make sure you're learning optimization skills. It's gonna be huge for you when you get on the job. So we've talked about all these skills before. I just still want to, in this I just derived from the responsibilities of a data engineer. I'm not gonna, because of time, I'm not gonna, elaborate on them. I'm just going to pick important ones. I've told you before about data modeling. That's the data architecture. It's key. In short, you can even pick this alone and carve a niche for yourself. and be a solution architect or something like that. That will just be like you model and you design the structure for a scalable pipeline. This so today, when you want to be a data engineer, people will tell you, oh, Python, you need to know Python. Yeah, you need to. In short, the way the life is going now, in the next couple of years, from the forecast from industry leaders, what they're saying is the role data engineering might fade into, might fade away, or maybe the emphasis on it will be reduced. I'm hoping you're able to get in before that time comes. So, but what they are forecasting is it's going to shift to maybe you can't just be a data engineer alone. You have to be maybe a software developer that has a bit of background in data engineering, or you have to be a data analyst or a data scientist that has a bit of background in data engineering. But like the role data engineer in the nearest future, we're not sure how near or how far the future is, might fade and merge into like some other career. They are just only speculating. They are not sure. But that is why it is important that you know things like Python, Java, Scala. But again, I wouldn't say someone should go to school and go and learn all this. You can start with Python. Python is very, very powerful. You can start with that. But before that, for today, that I know, for the market we are in right now, SQL is a very, very essential skill. And I was happy. I saw on the group chat that someone shared like basics of SQL for database querying. I can't remember the title specifically. If you can master SQL or SQL, whatever you know it as, this is a very strong language for communicating with databases. Remember I mentioned the other time, like for you to speak to a database to give you the data that you need to speak the language that the database understands. Emphasis, people are trying to move emphasis away from SQL. But now they have come to realize that we cannot. It's just so strong. It's so good in integrating with data warehouse or databases that even the so-called NoSQL big data thing, they now have things on top of them that will still allow people to program in SQL. That's to tell you how strong it is. So even if you can't do anything, if you think, okay, Python is too big, Java is too, just master SQL, know it in and out. And with that, you can get your first job that you can grow in to become maybe the one that will now be using Python. I will tell you for sure, where I was working before, I changed job last year. Where I was working before, and it's not because I wasn't tired of my job. Like I was just like, okay, I've seen a bit. I want to move on to learn more things. But it's a lie. Even now, it's still SQL. Where I was before, we're even doing Spark, we're doing Python, we're gradually fading out SQL. Well, I thought, okay, maybe there is more, but like I've come to realize, and even where I'm working now is way bigger in terms of name and brand than where I was before. But at the end of it, it's still SQL. So what am I trying to say? It's not every organization that has migrated off the old tech stack. So if you build yourself proficiency in SQL and you get into one of all these organizations that are still, using the old tech stack, that would be a good starting point for you. And you can now experience this experience. Nobody will ask you, find interview, they might ask you, okay, have you worked with Python? And some of this Python skill and everything, you can actually get it just by probably doing some of the things I've seen Adobe encourages you to do, which is doing all these it's an online boot camp, like all these projects that you do. But once you're able to prove that you can write a good SQL, yeah, you can even brand yourself as a data engineer and get your first job. To me, the most important thing is to get that first one, that first deal. And once you're able to prove yourself at one point in a place, it's easier to get the other ones. So yeah, I'm going to stress just on SQL on this page. The others, definitely, I know you can read it. You can see, you can read it and you see, yeah, like you can, except if anyone has any question about it, you can note it and then we talk about it when we get to the question and answer session. But on this page, three things I want to stress. Learn SQL, know how to model, and you can learn. It's good to learn Python. It is very, very good to learn Python, at least for a start. Over time, you can add on these ones. Apache Airflow, it's good. It's a very good skill. But I wouldn't want you to overwhelm yourself from the get-go with knowing Airflow, doing Spark, doing Kafka. No, let's just start from the basic. You go and master SQL. Go and know a bit about data modeling. Know what is fact, what is the dimension, how do they structure data in the data warehouse, all those kind of things. Definitely, you need to know about cloud. You can't even breathe now in the data world without cloud. You need to understand, but does that mean as I am, does I know end-to-end of AWS or Google or Azure? No, I don't. But at least I know well enough to know that, okay, when you're working in AWS, for instance, you need your S3 bucket to store your data. I know well enough to know, okay, when you're setting up an Azure, you need to know about storage and, things like that. Apart from that, to be honest, I don't know end to end. So it's good to have an overview of everything, but focus on your SQL, please. I can't stress it enough. So, career path. One good thing for everyone in this group, especially those that have been following everything happening in the group for a while, you should be able to apply for the role of a data analyst. That is, to me, if I'm even to advise anyone, this is a very good point to start as a data engineer. Start as an analyst, get into an organization, start playing with your data. Then from there, you can then become a data engineer. And you know what? They normally favor people in the organization already. But how do you get your job how do you land as a data analyst, especially if you're coming with banking or, experience not related to data engineering? I know that will be the question in your mind. Everything you need, I do follow the group chat, has been taught before now. A good knowledge of Excel, a good knowledge of Power BI, a good knowledge of SQL will land you the analyst role. But knowledge matched with your experience. Don't throw away what you've done in the past, even if you think it's not directly. Find a way to bring it into the world of data. You've worked in a bank, definitely you've generated reports. You've worked with data before. You can do use cases related to banking. Make it yours, make it your story, and sell it for the interviewer. And I know one thing that I just want to mention here. Please don't sell what you cannot deliver. Make sure whatever you have your resume, there are things you can do. If you need any support to be able to do something, you can always reach out to people within the community to support you in any way. You can watch, there are a lot of resources online to help you, to integrate you into what you want to become. But one thing you should never do, please, do not put in what you know you cannot speak to or you cannot defend on your job. That doesn't mean everything on your resume is what you can do. Definitely, sometimes we blow things up, but at least you can speak to it if you're asked in an interview. And most importantly, if you get a job, you can actually deliver. I will give you an example here. I'm going to try to summarize the example as much as I can. It's a long story. A couple of years ago, in my past role, I was a manager of a data engineering team. And because of that, when we recruit, interview for peer, if my colleague wants to recruit, they call me for the interview panel, and we support each other that way. There was a particular resume that came in, not so fantastic, but it's okay as a resume. Was shortlisted for a video interview. She did quite okay. She met with us. She was okay. At least she spoke. Although for me, I already knew that most of the things on the resume she cannot defend. Not last year, it's actually 2 years ago. That was the era where COVID was just, we're just recovering from COVID. There was this shortage in the engineering and data space. So we're really, really, really looking for someone. It's just like the right candidates are not out there. Maybe people don't want to change jobs, people don't want to work. I can't even understand what was happening that time. But we couldn't get the right candidate. So we're just forced to say, okay, even though we know these candidates are not so fantastic, let's just pick one of them. And there was a Nigerian on one of the three that were shortlisted. Because I'm an Nigerian, I would definitely want to root for, because I know wherever we get to, we try to, we don't want to be the lazy one. We try to give our best. So this lady, there were three of them. So they asked me, which one should we just pick? Let's just pick one. Anyone will pick. We need to train them anyways. So let's pick one of them to train. But I don't really like people putting what they cannot defend into their resume. So there are some questions we asked. She doesn't even have so much of a clue. So I was like, for me, I don't know. None of them is like fantastic, but like maybe if you really want to have one more round of interview, this Nigerian and one other lady, just, let's see how they do. Let other people interview them and, pick from one of them. Well, that was all I said. But okay, to cut the long story short, Nigerian doing the job. Do you know that this lady cannot even, what's the most basic thing in the data world? She got the job. The pay was not overly good, but to me, it's fantastic for someone that doesn't even know whatever she's applying for. If I were to be in her shoes, I would do everything to keep that job. She tried, but she doesn't just know. She doesn't know anything. So that's what I say, please, you can, with the help of all this journey and everything, you can do good with your resume. You can do good to impress an interview, but make sure what you put in your resume, there are things you can do, deliver when you get it, because it's going to be painful. I can imagine that when they wanted to let her go, it's so painful to me, because I can imagine someone spend 3 months, you've already adjusted to earning, X amount, and having to go without a job. Fine, some people might say she brought that upon herself, but like, it shouldn't happen to anyone. And the way to avoid it is just to make sure. Although some people say fake it until you make it, but I don't really believe in that. Just make sure whatever you're putting, put your work, your best effort now to be able to make sure that when you get the job, you're able to defend it, retain it, and grow through it. That's all I would say. But it's a very good place to start is to be a data analyst. For those that have been database administrator before, you're in a good space. If you've been a software engineer before, very good space. You can then transition into, this one. And, just as I mentioned, data architect, please read about it. If you find out this is one thing that probably, appeal to you, by all means. And someone asked a question in the that I just want to just address, that is it essential for you to have a certification before you embark on this journey? I would say yes or no. I know it's like I'm sitting on the fence, but I will defend myself. So if you don't have a computing background, by all means, aim to get a certification. But must you wait until you get a certification before you start applying? No, no. However, work towards it. That's just trying to say, even though I don't have the background you think, because for most of the roles they'll say computing, mathematics or something. Even though I don't have the background you want, I've been able to prove myself to a body that is recognized, that I know what you want. I know what you're requesting for. That's just what a certification does. But that doesn't mean you should wait until you get a certification before you start applying. Keep applying. Work towards it. As you're working even towards your certification, you're learning on the job. You're learning as you know, applying. That's what for me, that's if I have resume, if I have two resume of two people without computing background, without relevant experience, one has a certification, one doesn't, that's just for me. I'm not saying that's applicable everywhere. I'm going to pick the one with the certification because at least I will say, okay, even though both of them don't know, at least this one, I've been able to say for the certification and she has passed. Some people might cheat to pass, but like at least you have it. Let me listen to what she has to say. That's just my own personal take, but I'm not saying that's the way it is globally. So now that we've done all the talk for over an hour, what are the next steps to take? Master the fundamental. Make sure you understand SQL, please. If you haven't before, this is the time to start. If you're planning to be an analyst or don't think Excel enough will land you that job. Excel is good. It's very good. And people still, even though people talk against it, people still use it. Like most organizations still use it. However, Excel alone on your resume will not land you the roles you want. Except, I might be wrong. Don't let me talk as an authority here because I'm not the one, screening resume, but like from my own experience, you can't just say you've done so using Excel and you expect that, okay, in this world, in this age, they want to listen. But if you've proven that you've used SQL, you've used Python, and using Python, to me, what I did then was just to make sure I could use Python to read from Excel and to transform the data. That's pretty much what you'll be doing in everyday life of a data engineer. You use Python Python to get data from this source to another. That's basically, so if you've been able to prove that from all the projects you've done, you can link that to one of the experience you've had before and say, okay, in so place, you've been able to, because knowing fully well that if they give you the job, you are able to do it. But don't over embellish it to the extent that maybe when they ask you a question in the interview, you are not able to answer. So please invest in learning SQL, and there are a lot of free resources on YouTube. There is even this guy, Smith, I'm going to mention his name in subsequent slide. He has a free, I can't remember how many hours on YouTube for SQL. Please take time, learn big data technology. I've told you before, this might not be what you do immediately. You can start with, this one, you graduate this one, but definitely you have to understand data warehousing. You have to understand OLTP, OLAP. You have to understand data modeling. You have to practice with real world projects. And that's one good thing with the group you belong to. Make sure, don't take the projects. It's not easy. They normally say that success is not set like a la carte. Like you have to work for it. They don't just display it on your phone and say, pick what you want. You have to like work for it, please, especially if you're transitioning. I know it's not easy, especially when if you're not young at this age to just be, struggling with the fact that you want to be doing project, but please dedicate the time. This is what I want to say. Stay up to date with industry trends. Collaborate and communicate. Make sure you are up to date with, courses and whatever is obtainable. I've mentioned it before. But how do you do this? To do it, this is what personally, this is what I do. I seek not direct mentorship, like on LinkedIn, I have a lot of people I follow. And you know the beauty of it? I don't have to go and study for hours to know what is happening in the tech world. This guy, this is the one that I said has free YouTube videos for SQL and even for data engineering. This guy, they will just throw some nuggets one day and they can explain it. Sometimes they don't explain it. You only need to Google to catch it. So by following these guys, and there is a Nigerian too, I forgot to put his name, Brian Ineji. You don't have to now read for 2 hours before you catch up what is happening in the tech world. If you now see a buzzword that you think probably you need to dwell on more, but at least they've set you going. You have this starting point that you can build on. So please follow these guys on LinkedIn. And to even buttress my point, I'm going to show some of these snippets that I got from the guys I follow on LinkedIn. So, but be patient and be persistent. We've said it before. I know you've heard it before. Persistence. Don't think because maybe you got a rejection today, that's it. Please keep persistent. So what's a day in the life of a data engineer? Usually start with your tea, coffee. A lot of people take coffee, tea, if it's prayer, whatever gets you started in a day, you start it. You do your audio. You do your data pipeline monitoring and troubleshooting. This takes a lot of time. Optimization takes a lot of time. It's not every day you model. It's not every day you develop. But these two, they take a lot of time. Collaboration takes time. And of course, you need to always stay up to date with happenings in your, community. So that's it. I just want to share, to buttress what I said about, about just give me a few seconds. I'm gonna share again about the role of following the guys that are on LinkedIn that know. Look at this. Can you see my screen? If you see this guy, see, this is maybe a 3-minute read. But by the time you read this, you know the things you're supposed to focus on if you want to start your SQL journey. You know already that it's not as if you need to read everything, but these are the things you need to focus on. That's on. There are, I have 2 more, which might be more beneficial, but I can share it in our WhatsApp group, just for you to see that, by following the right people on LinkedIn can save you hours of reading and, hours of, researching.